let's talk about Springbank, and in particular the Springbank shortage that we are all experiencing at the moment. Especially if you're in the US, you will have noticed that Springbank is suddenly extremely difficult to find on the shelves of your local shop. And if you can find it, it's being sold at extortionate prices. Back in the day when I started, experimenting with single malts and stuff, you would get Springbank 10-year-old for between 45 and $50 in most places. It is now around twice that. Here in my local Binnies, it is $100. And the cask strength 12-year-old, which used to be a bargain at $60, $65, something like that, is now well in the 120s, 130s if you can find it. And again, it's kind of been pulled off the shelves in most places. So what the hell is going on, and what can we do about it? Okay, I think this is happening for two reasons. The one reason has to do with people like me and people like Serge Valentine and people like Ralphie. We've been saying for years and years and years that people should stop buying, branded, overproduced, non-age statement, not good stuff, and instead put their money towards, smaller, hands-on, artisanal distilleries, doing things, if not in an old-fashioned way, but in a very distinctive way, where you're getting something that's much closer to the still, much closer to the cask. We've been saying that for years, and God help us, people have actually listened, which seems like it should be a good thing, except, people are buying this stuff now, and there's not that much of it being made, and now it's kind of flying off the shelves. Springbank is now being recognized, rightly so, as a bit of a first growth of Scotland, a bit of a premier cru, top 10 easily distilleries, if not top 5 in the country. But in that list, they're almost certainly the most artisanal, the most connected to the surrounding community, the most sort of idiosyncratic, much weirder in their own way than the Lagavulins and the Ardbegs and those folks. So they don't make much of this stuff, really. It's a smallish distillery, and so you start putting demand on the stocks from both drinkers and the collectibles market. The collectibles market has noticed this too, because the drinkers noticed it first. Those stocks are going to go away fast. The other part of it is the importer. Springbank used to be brought in by Price Imports. I wonder if it got... so I've got an older bottle of here. I wonder if they still got the stamp on the back. Yep. Price Imports used to bring this stuff in, and they were great. I like them a lot, and I think they are now no longer of this world. And Springbank and Springbank portfolio, including Cadenheads, has now been picked up by Pacific Edge, who are their pricing is whatever the opposite of aggressive is. Passive aggressive, maybe. No, not. They know what they got. They know what they've got, and they are shaking down the rest of us on their wholesale pricing. So it's not really the stores, charging $100 for the 10-year-old. That's not really. They're not really getting as much of a margin on that as you can think. It's really, and I understand importers. It's expensive to bring over booze from another continent, but I mean, when people can actually save money by having bottles shipped from, over on an airplane in from a retailer in Europe or the UK, and something's wrong. Something has gone horribly wrong there. And that's all I'm going to say about that. So in any case, the absence of Springbank from the shelves and the extremely high prices prompts a question like, what? Okay, those of us nerds who've been in this for a while, as well as the newcomers, what else is out there? What else is going to scratch that itch? So we're looking for something It doesn't even have to be as good, right? Not necessarily as good as good old Springbank 10-year-old, the 15, the 12, but just something that's kind of in the same neighborhood and more available and, interesting. And so, footnote, I'm talking about the Springbank malt in particular here because one of the fun things about the Springbank distillery is they make three different kinds of malt. They make Hazelburn, which is triple distilled, and they also make Longrow, which is heavily peated and only double distilled. Springbank is in many ways the weirdest distillate of the bunch. Back to that in a minute. So that's the question: is there a Springbank substitute? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to bring out a couple of different bottles, put them up against a bottle of Springbank, and see, how close, how well does it scratch that same itch? That's the premise of the video. We're also going to do like regular old, scores and stuff, but we're also going to, give the bottles a Springbank Substitution Index score. Anyways, so this is substituting for Springbank is extremely hard because Springbank is a very, very weird distillate. In a number of ways. So first of all, it's peated. It's, what would I say? Not lightly. The lighter side of moderately peated. There aren't a lot of other malts that do that. There's a lot of heavier peated malts, starting, around Bowmore, say. Bowmore is on the lighter side of more heavily peated, right? Ardmore is right there as well. And then you sort of go up from there. And then you've also got some malts which are, if not totally unpeated, then very, very lightly peated. Your Glenfiddichs, your Clynlishes, Glenallachie is another example. Where, if you can find some peat there, it really sort of takes some looking. And for the most part, it's just, kind of a little bit of extra color in the background and you don't notice it explicitly. Springbank is at the point where it's not the star of the show. The peat is not the star of the show, but it's an important part of the ensemble. It's one part of the cast among other characters. There isn't a lot, there aren't a lot of other malts out there that still do that. It's sort of, either it's got a ton of peat or it's got practically none. And there's not a lot in between. So that's already making things hard. Also, there's if you can name sort of a weird little device or innovation in distilling, and Springbank probably has it somewhere. You've got worn tubs, you've got direct fired stills. I think it's only the wash still that is direct fired. I don't know why. You've got some, they play around with their barley types, right? We're not going to talk about that yet. And most weird of all is what is called partial triple distillation, which is sort of shorthand for a whole bunch of different distillation regimes that can be very different from each other. Mortlach does not look like, if you sort of sketched out the diagram of how the distillation looks, it does not look like what Springbank is doing. And it doesn't look like what Benromach is doing. So they're all a little bit different, but partial triple distillation, and you would think that would make the spirit lighter, and it actually somehow makes it heavier. And no one I've checked, or none of the resources I've checked, seem to be able to explain that mystery. Anyhow, so it's really hard to find another malt that ticks all of those boxes. In fact, I think it's impossible. Springbank is unique in that sense. It's actually pretty hard to find malts that tick any of those boxes. So today, I'm going to line up ones that kind of do a few and see how they do. We're going to focus on the partial triple distillation thing, and we're going to focus on the sort of lighter side of moderately peated thing. We're going to try to find malts that sort of tick those boxes. And I'm looking for stuff that is cheaper than Springbank 10, and I'm looking for stuff that is kind of broadly available. Those are my rules. So what have I got? The baseline, which is going to establish our Springbankness, is, let me take this out of the box here. All right, this is a Springbank 10-year-old. but it's not the current one. This is actually from about 10 years ago. I grabbed this and just had it in a box. So bottled 2011, 2012. This is a 100 proof. Now, there were different versions of this. In the UK, the 100 proof is, of course, 57% alcohol because proof is different. They also had a different wood aging thing there. This is basically just a version of, this US version is basically just 50% alcohol, and it's the same wood as the regular 10-year-old, same mix of bourbon and sherry casks. It's just a little bit stronger, and I grabbed it because it seemed fun. So this is, this is going to establish the standard for our Springbank substitution index. This is 10 out of 10. You cannot get more Springbanky than Springbank. Actually, I'm going to pour this. All right. And what else we got on the, I think I paid like $55 for this or something. Madness. Next up is the also partially triple distilled option. And this is going to make some people scream, I know. But Mortlach, 12-year-old. This is the official bottling. Witchie. Okay. Is that backwards? That's backwards. Sorry. All right. Why pick this one? Well, also has some sherry influence on it. Actually, probably more than the Springbank. But I think also some bourbon casks in there. And also does the same kind of triple distillation thing in its own way. Not really heavily peated or even moderately peated to speak of, but the triple distillation thing is the interesting thing here. So Mortlach has some normal stills, normal kind of still setup, and then off on the side it has this little tiny still called the Witchie, and some of the distillate goes through that thing, which is, I will try to link below a description of Mortlach's distilling regime because it is absolutely bonkers and I don't understand it at all. But the effect of that is a very, very, very heavy, sulfury kind of distillate. So my hypothesis here is that heaviness will be enough like, Springbank heaviness that it can provide it will have a decent, Springbank substitution index. So that's my first thought. By the way, one on the SSI would be, I don't know, some lame, monkey shoulder. Let's say monkey shoulder defines a 1 on the Springbank substitution index. Monkey shoulder ain't doing the job. All right, next up after the Mortlach 12, which I will now pour, is Benromach, 10-year-old. Okay, I adore Benromach. This is a very old distillery that was maybe 20 years ago, bought up and kind of renovated by Gordon and MacPhail. By the way, I did look for the new packaging. This is the old packaging, which I kind of like better. I don't like any of the Benromach looks, but I kind of like this just a smidgen more than the new one. Anyways, this bottling is from, I think, 2018 or so. They actually put the date on the bottom somewhere. Sorry. Yeah, 2018. Also a mix of sherry and bourbon casks, and this one is also sort of on the light side of moderately peated. So we're sort of getting the right peat level here with our Benromach, which is not going to be the case with our Mortlach. I've gotten Springbank vibes from Benromach before, so I'm hoping it can happen here. By the way, both of these are much more reasonably priced than the Springbank 10 currently is. All right, and my last pick for a Springbank substitute is this. It is an Unnamed Orkney So Highland Park, it's never Scapa. I wish it was Scapa sometimes, but it's never Scapa. This is bottled by Signatory, and you may say, well, hang on, this is a single barrel independent bottling. Doesn't that violate sort of all your rules? Yes and no. I mean, you're not going to be able to find this. This is a pick by Winebow in Illinois, who distributes Signatory. But there is a lot of independently bottled Orkney / Highland Park out there, and a lot of it is pretty reasonably priced. This was south of $100, and in theory should be starting to get into Springbanky territory, because it is also on the lighter side of of moderately peated. Peat is there playing a role, but not sort of the headliner. So this is the thought. We've got our partial triple distillation and our two sort of lightly moderately peated offerings. And we'll just taste through these guys and see how they go. All right. First, the Springbank 10-year-old 100 proof. Single malt from Campbelltown. Non-chill filtered, no color added, of course. Oh God, I mean it's Springbank. Oh wait. I was about to say that smells more like Highland Park than sorry. I grabbed the wrong glass. It's been a long week. Yeah, there we go. I was just about to say where the hell is my sort of tarry, briny, sort of sulfury, rubbery notes. But there they are. Oh man. Yeah, they're. All right, what do we got? Extremely heavy. This is not that peaty, but it is phenolic. You're getting these sort of big long chain molecules. It reminds me in some ways of like Fijian rum, so South Pacific distillers. Brined pear, just lots of brine, and there's so much minerality in this. Waxiness, white pepper, and the sherry is having some influence too. There's no more. I seem to recall more recent Springbanks having a little bit more wood influence than this, but I mean you can still tell the sherry is there. It's like orange slice candy is the best I can do. God, and like just a musty, heavy character, like old tea bags in a musty basement. And then way in the back is the sort of, twiggy, stinky, barnyardy mainland peat. So it's peaty, but this is not clean, nice maritime Isla peat. This is, there's a couple of stinky dogs running around the background, maybe a couple pigs in there, lots of mud, kind of mingling around with the peat. I mean, what really strikes me now right now is especially after nosing the Highland Park first, is just how mineral driven the Springbank is, and somehow that minerality, the sulfury, rocky, rubbery kind of character to this is actually holding the event together. In some ways, it reminds me of like a red wine from the Grave, Pesach from like a good year like 2005. That the sort of the delicacy, the subtlety, all being held together by this incredible mineral rockiness. Oh, it's a lovely nose. Some fudge in there, so, like confectioner's fudge, but also like chocolate fudge. Vanilla, like burned vanilla, some just straight up Amontillado sherry, and a little bit floral too. There's a kind of dirty, rocky, minerally, barnyardy flower note. and exactly 1 dollop of applesauce. Just excellent. I love this stuff. Is it worth, the $100 you'd be paying for it now? I mean, that's not really, but Jesus, it's good. On the palate, oh, it is good though. Oh God, the delicacy, the balance, and it's surprisingly sweet. You stay away from Springbank for a while and you come back to it, you forget how sweet it is. Not any added sugar in this, obviously, but something about the distillate and the rockiness, the intense minerality, the heavier notes somehow brings out the sugar even more. Confectioner's fudge, salted caramel, like briny caramel. Barnyardy peat, the Amontillado thing comes back. So, oxidative sherry that's kind of bordering on regular old white wine. Ooh, but rocks, sulfur, rubber, orange slice, again, the orange slice candies, the things you buy in the grocery store aisle next to the candy that you probably actually want. Like forest mushrooms, of all things, some like dirt, some dried dirt, old wet basement wax again, pepper, definitely some pepper, like freshly ground pepper. Black tea, Darjeeling tea, pears. But again, that sort of, I don't know if brined pear is a thing, but it feels like it should be a thing. Lychee fruit. Oh, tons of lychee fruit, actually. Some coconut. A little bit of coconut, yeah. More like coconut essence than the actual, like the fruit. Something nutty, like an almond butter kind of character. And then you're going to throw in like a little bit of smoke from like a Nicaraguan cigar or something, like a really, heavy, nutty kind of smoke. I mean, absolutely one of the best distillates in the world. I'm sorry. I can't change that. I can't make Springbank any less good than it is. Yeah, that's terrific. Okay, so on the Springbank Substitution Index, this 10 out of 10 is, this 10-year-old is getting a 10 out of 10. Let's see how the others do. I'm going to add a little bit of water and we'll go through another time. 1 squirt, 2 squirts. All right. All right, so the Mortlach is in the death spot, but that's okay because Mortlach is a terrific malt all on its own. And, if it's not as good, that's okay because this is literally less than half the price of what the regular 10-year-old would be. So, let's see what we get for $45. Okay, so again, I'm immediately feeling the lack of peat here. And that's making some difference. And it's not, I mean, there's a heaviness to this. There's a heavy phenolic, struck match kind of core to this, but it doesn't feel as grungy and as dirty. This is also bottled at lower strength. This is 43.4%. Nothing said about natural color or chill filtration, so, we shall see. There is something a little bit Springbanky here going on though. The heaviness, the weight of this in the glass. I know some Mortlach nerds are looking at this and saying that's not real Mortlach. That's like a cleaned up, sanitized version. And I feel you. I sort of agree with that. But it's also just a nice malt. And for, I mean, this is pretty much, what, $5 more than where Glenfiddich 10 is right now? Are you kidding me? A lot more sherry on this Mortlach than the Springbank. I'm getting some orange liqueur, Cointreau, golden raisins, a couple of walnut shells actually, and really some like green walnuts. Malted milk balls, a little bit of candied ginger. Struck matches again. Lots of, I mean, those heavy, those heavier notes that come from the wee Witchie. Oh, they're lots of fun. Some like a, what is that? Like a young, almost a young Armagnac note. It's like a, maybe like a 10-year-old Armagnac in less active wood where, it's woody, but the distillate, the floral nature of the distillate is kind of still coming through. White pepper. Stewed black tea again, but it's more malty this time. It's more like an awesome tea, an English breakfast tea than Darjeeling. And actually that kind of gives you a sense of this is much more traditionally malty than the Springbank is. It's nice. And it's very, very clean by Mortlach standards, but without, giving up its Mortlachness, if that makes sense. On the palate, oh, the development on that is very nice. Arrives very fruity, and then just covers my mouth in a kind of, those heavier phenolic, slightly sulfury notes, and a lot of pepper. Nice dry finish on this. Yeah. Heavier notes, little minerality, but more on like struck match than like actual rocks. Apple cheese, so dried apple. Cointreau again. Golden raisins. But then there's like this lovely grungy. What is that? I feel like I just went cleaned out a chimney or something. There's a sootiness to this. Yeah, like chimney ash. Overstewed tea, ground pepper. Actually, a little bit of coconut on this too, but it's more, we are actually getting coconut shavings this time, not the essence. And more sort of nice sherry notes. The malted milk balls thing. More dried fruit. And yeah, actually a little bit of an Amontillado kind of note. Tell you what, I don't think of this as an adequate substitute for Springbank, really, or at least that's how it's turning out right now. I'm gonna add a little squirt of water and we'll come back. But what it is maybe the best sort of sub 50, or in the running at least for the best sub 50 malt you can buy. Jesus, that's good. It feels nice in the mouth. All right, moving on. I am adjusting my notes. All right, Benromach 10. So the fun thing about Benromach 10 is Gordon MacPhail completely redesigned the still to try to make a very, very basically oily, heavy distillate, but heavy in a different way than something like Springbank is. It's not really so much the phenolic weight as just the kind of oiliness. It's not very big stills. It's just designed to be, a kind of really full-bodied, creamy new make. But also, it's got that lightly peated aspect to it, right? So let's see what we got. I think the intention was to kind of create kind of an old school or Highland malt, old school Speyside, before everything got all cleaned up. Oh, that's a fun nose. Okay, we're getting a collision course between heavy sherry. Again, this is a little bit more heavily sherried than the Springbank is. Between the sherry influence and just stinky ass barnyard peat. And it's barnyard, it's muddy, it's stinky animals, but it's also chocolatey at the same time. Something about mainland peat does a chocolate thing, along with the barnyard thing. And coal smoke is in there too. Amontillado. I keep reusing that note, but these are very, this is not someone taking a fresh French oak cask and throwing some Oloroso or something in there and swishing it around a little bit. This feels like, they've had some actual sherry in there for a while. It was a little bit dripping wet when they added their distillate in there. Amontillado, almond butter again. But I cannot get over the stinky, muddy, chocolatey peat. Dried cherry, dried orange, like smoked orange. A little bit of a matchbook note, but has way less of that than the previous two. Malted milk balls again, coconut oil this time. But like not I'm sorry. When I think of coconut oil, I think of the sort of cheap refined stuff, not the the extra virgin things in the little jars that cost like $10. I'm talking about the ones you go to Walmart and you get a big tub of this stuff and it just smells. It smells like fat. This smells like a very fat distillate. Lots of black tea, different kinds. And I mean a certain like a tea and oak and fruit thing. It smells like a Gran Reserva Rioja or something like that. Exactly one old tire and like a flavored tobacco. It smells a little bit like a Swisher Sweet, which I love. I love that smell. Don't ask me why. Don't ask me to justify that. On the palate. Oh, hello. How do I explain this? You know how when an actor plays a historical figure in a movie, sometimes it can work better when the actor is kind of not trying to do an impersonation, where they're just borrowing little bits of mannerisms and kind of remixing them and doing their own thing. That's kind of what this is doing. Like this doesn't have the heavy phenolic character of something like Springbank, but it's going about the heaviness in its own way. This is really just a very, very fat, oily malt, and this is 43%, right? This is nothing about natural color or chill filtration, although Gordon MacPhail, independent distillery, so I doubt there's many shenanigans going on, but still. Less heavy, more oily, if that makes sense. Good Oloroso casks. Or maybe like a Palo Cortado cask. Some like rubber, but like a pencil eraser married to like prunes and some like walnut butter, maybe almond butter again. Black pepper. Just feels viscous in my mouth. There was all those rumors, back in the day about how right after the war, Macallan had to use a little bit of peat because they couldn't get, proper heating materials to dry out their malt. They had to peat their malt for a little while. So those batches are a little bit legendary, and I'll never get to try them. But this gives me some sense of what a distillate like that would have been like. That sort of incredible oiliness married to a little bit of peat and then stuck into a sherry cask. This is kind of what, but like also glancing at Springbank at the same time. Oh, I like this stuff. Barnyardy, twiggy peat, chocolate, campfire smoke, coal smoke, mud, stinky animals, all the things I love. dark chocolate, lot like more like just cacao, straight up cacao than actual chocolate. Some dried orange, English breakfast tea, toasted malt, like you would use in like a porter or something. And then just like a long ashy finish, ashy oily finish on like Cuban cigars and olive oil, and a little like river clay, weirdly enough. Yeah, I mean I still like the Springbank 10 better, but I'll say this now. I have never tried the Springbank 18, but I have tried both the Springbank 15 and the Benromach 15, and honestly, I kind of like the Benromach one better. I wouldn't be surprised. So as much as I love Springbank, I feel like the I don't feel like the older versions I've had are totally worth it. I feel like Springbank doesn't necessarily age as well, at least not in active casks, as well as some other malts. I feel like given enough time, the sheer oiliness, the fattiness, the fatty fatness of Benromach would actually make it age better. And to tell you the truth, I would love to see nothing better in the world than like a Benromach 18 all sherry cask at half the price of Macallan 18, and just rubbing its face in the ridiculousness of the Macallan price scheme. Anyways, moving on to our last entry. This is the Unnamed Orkney from Signatory, bottled for Winebow, who are the Chicago distributors. This was bottled in or distilled May 7th, 2005, bottled August 9th, 2018. So 13 years old. Matured in a hogshead with a number I will put down below because it's very long. 323 bottles at a strength of 56.2% alcohol by volume. So cask strength, all the fun goodness that accompanies independent bottling. And almost certainly bourbon matured, although it doesn't say. It just says hogshead. All right, what do we got? So my theory on this is that the light to moderate peatiness on this is going to make this, more Springbanky. And certainly, I mean, this is my first Highland Park that I reviewed, and part of that is just because I like the official range, but it also, at least in theory, but it's nothing they put out recently has really sort of excited me, and they've tried. Like there's some cask strength stuff, there's some higher proof stuff, but I always just find myself migrating back to the smaller independent bottlers when it comes to Highland Park. And maybe I'll change my mind one day, but for the moment, this is what I want to try out against Springbank, and this is kind of what I'm sticking to in my own enjoyment. All right, so here we go. On the nose, Unnamed Orkney. Okay, cask strength. I'm getting the alcohol nippiness. But then heather, vanilla, boatload of wildflower honey. Some like cigarette ash going on. It smells like a bourbon cask though. It really does. So no sherry influence on that. And it kind of feels lacking. The 10-year-old Springbank feels like it doesn't have that much sherry, but it's got enough there you can kind of tell. And it's got this sort of Orkney peat is a little bit different than mainland peat. It's still very twiggy and feels more campfirey than sort of anything off of Isla. But it doesn't have the same stinkiness as mainland stuff. So it's sort of twiggy, campfirey peat, burned flowers, and then like a pool water note. Yeah, like pool water, like chlorinated water, but nice. Pear, burned pear, something herbaceous, like fresh mint maybe, but also some fresh rosemary, white pepper, and actually this feels more minerally than Benromach did. There's some wet rocks in there. and a little bit of a mustard thing, like one mustard seed. It's actually quite quiet right now. It's not all that expressive prior to my adding water, and I will be adding quite a lot of water to this. On the palate, there's a lot more mustard seed on the palate. I am getting heather, vanilla, more honey, and then that sort of twiggy peat in the back, the campfire peat. Hold on, I have to plug in my computer. It's gonna die. Be right back. The perils of home reviewing. Yeah, the minerality is actually quite pronounced. Black pepper, soggy tea bags, that pool water thing, lots of rocks, and a nice dry finish on the back end. That's very nice. But again, we're lacking. I'm missing the sherry cask a little bit. It's very nice. It's very balanced. But maybe this will change when I add water. There's lots of great little delicious things going on, but there isn't a whole lot of depth to this. It's delightful, but I can't help but demand a little bit more nuance, a little more subtlety and complexity, and just a few more things going on. Right now, it's lots of nice stuff. That's I want a little bit more. A little fresh mint, pear, toasted pear, some creme brulee. That would be the bourbon cask. And let's see if there's anything else. No, that's about it. Kind of rocks, some salt, some brine, but overall pretty simple. Kind of has a pleasant, fruity, heather, honeyed, ashy character to it that I'm enjoying. But I kind of want more from this, especially from 13-year-old cask strength Highland Park. All right, let's give this a couple squirts of water and come back to it. Let's do 4.5. If it sounds like I'm being a little bit harsh, I'm coming to this from having tried some of the Highland Parks distilled in the 90s, and sort of getting up into their teens, and releases as signatories and some of the other bottlings, and those were really, really, really good, and just felt like they had a little bit more going on in the background than this guy. But hey, reasonably priced, right? So maybe that's okay. I will give this another half squirt of water, and we'll go back to the beginning. By the way, I don't think I mentioned this before. You may be screaming at your screen right now, but Scott, this whole Springbank substitution question thing is kind of stupid because there's an obvious answer. Springbank is not the only distillery in Campbelltown, in the Mull of Kintyre. In fact, there's a whole bunch of others, not least of which would be Glengyle, makers of the Kilkerran malt, and also Glen Scotia. I don't have an official Glen Scotia right now, but here's another signatory. So why not just talk about these? Answer's pretty simple, actually. The problem with Kilkerran is it's owned by the same people as Springbank, And the collectors in the markets have also started snapping this up. So the prices on this are just as insane, and it's just as hard to find. So this is kind of out too. Glen Scotia is very, very interesting as a distillery, and I'm going to talk about it and give it its 15 minutes of fame at some other point. But basically, I think it's definitely one to watch in the medium to long term. But right now, it feels like a little bit of a hot mess. I feel like the owners have kind of, with the official bottlings that I've had, at least up until quarantine, we're trying to re-rack everything that they had in their stocks and whatever wood they had on hand, and it didn't always work successfully. But in the future, Glen Scotia has a really, really interesting profile, and I really want to see where they take it in the future. So, but right now, a bit of a hot mess. I don't think it's a substitute for Springbank. So, back to the ones I put on the table. And first of all, back to the Springbank. So, Springbank 100 proof, now with some water in it. How does it fare? How does it develop with a little water? Okay, with water, it gets the Springbank 100 proof gets even more phenolic, sooty, waxy too, and there's a little bit of like a lemon note coming through. It just feels heavy and serious, and there's more seawater. Oh God, it's just it's a very, very serious malt, Springbank. It doesn't feel like the kind of malt you would just open up and drink, casually while watching the game. This is one, you want to have the TV turned off, the music turned off. You want sort of the piece to sort of appreciate what's going on in this. Yeah, serious is the word. On the palate, it's not. This is probably not worth $100, but if you wanted to, I would understand. I really would. Oh God, the sweetness is just totally surprising me every time I sip this. It actually gets sweeter with a little bit of water, but then coal smoke, fudge and coal smoke, and salted toffee, and that sort of coconut essence thing. Black pepper, barnyard peat. Delicious and extremely complex and subtle and nuanced and rocky and minerally at the same time. Yeah, this is, the Grave in a good year. Impossible to debate this. It's just excellent. I would give this 89 points out of 100, this particular bottle, which I think I might actually like less than some of the Springbank 10s made more recently. It's just really good stuff. Of course, on the SSI, the Springbank Substitution Index, this gets a 10 out of 10 because it is Springbank. Okay, moving on to the other entries. All right, back to Mortlach. The Mortlach 12 with a little bit of water because it was already bottled at 43-ish%. Not a lot of huge development on this. The fruitiness, the overt fruitiness, kind of pulls back a little bit, and what we are left with a lot of heavier notes, a lot of sulfur, and like some orange pith. Some more like bitter fruit than fruity fruit. Coal smoke, heaviness. It's converging on Springbank lightly, very nicely actually. On the again, the only thing that's lacking here is the peat. The cast presentation would be great also, but it's really just lacking that sort of the peatiness. On the palate, Very good. An extremely good development too. It's a terrific explosion, and amusement park ride through, delicious fruit up front, sherry fruit, and then struck match, rocks, smoke, orange pith again, pepper, sherry, Amontillado sherry, and like tea leaves. This actually comes across as more austere than the Springbank. The Springbank has a seriousness to it, but it's sort of offset by the sweetness. This doesn't have the same sweetness. This is actually, has more austerity to it. Let me try one more time. In terms of Springbank substitution, the lack of peat is kind of, and the extra sherryness is doing this in a little bit. I would only give this a 7.5 on the Springbank substitution index. But as a malt, and particularly as a $45 malt, I don't think I could do better than this. I do maybe like the Bunnahabhain 12 a little bit more than this. Which is $50. But if I only had 45 and I had to walk out with this, I would be very happy. I would give this an 85 out of 100. This is real good. Well done, Diageo, for putting out a very approachable but very Mortlach-y version of Mortlach. Yeah, 85 points. All right, moving on to the Benromach. Okay, now with a little bit of water, let's see. Oh, here we go. It actually gets more nutty and kind of more grungy. More what is that? It's like a kind of a green walnut note coming out now. Some sweet stoved Virginia tobacco. And more orange. God, I just love the profile here. This is, for me, this is almost perfect. This is almost like just a textbook example of, if you wanted to hand someone a malt that was just supposed to represent Scotland and it wasn't Springbank, I would probably go with this one. It's just this perfect balance of, the stinky peat, the sherry influence, the maltiness, the oiliness, the weight, but also the beauty of Scotch single malt. I would love to have this at 46 and unchill filtered and all that stuff, but this is still doing it for me. On the palate, so again, we're bringing out more nuttiness, more green walnut, sherryness as well. And actually, there's some heavy fusel notes coming out now. We're converging. We're converging on Springbank, and much more so than the Mortlach actually. And a little bit of like that sort of, what is it? The fat olive oil / river clay thing, that viscosity. Yeah, this could just be an ambassador for malt whiskey in general. This is real good. I would give this 87 plus out of 100. I like this a lot. Again, it's, the Springbank is just in a little bit of a different league as a first growth, but this is considerably cheaper, and I gotta say, it's scratching that itch. It's this is the one out of all these so far. This is the one that most scratches the same Springbank itch, but it does it without trying to impersonate Springbank. It's just kind of getting the same heaviness in its own kind of way, if that makes sense. 87 plus, and a 9.0 on the Springbank Substitution Index. This would be my go-to Springbank substitute. All right, so that brings us back to the Unnamed Orkney. Now with some water and at proper drinking strength. All right, here we go. On the nose. Okay, the campfire smoke, the twigginess, the minerality, the rocks have kind of come out a little more to play. Much louder on the nose now. It's twiggy, it's honeyed. Yeah, twiggy, honeyed, rocky pool water is kind of what I'm getting from this. That pool water thing is definitely there. With a cup of tea on the side, a little dirt. It's louder. It hasn't really. I'm getting more of what was there before, but it feels like more of a reshuffling than real development of what was there with the water. More kind of apple pear stuff coming through, just straight up maltiness, but like burned apple pear. I mean, this is lovely, but it's also not necessarily standing out in this kind of company, you know? And I like Highland Park. All right, on the palate. Some burned marshmallow, much more peppery. Ooh, much more peppery. Like, just take a pepper grinder and up to my mouth and just start going. Twigs, heather, heather honey, the sort of lighter, more delicate kind of island peat thing, and you know the bourbon cask, the creme brulee kind of note, kind of holding it all up. And a little more pear this time, you know, sort of cooked pear. Extremely good. Not a high-flying Highland Park by my judgment. This isn't like God-tier Highland Park. But delicious. Extremely good. I would give this, let's say an 87. Out of 100. I would put it, I mean, the cask strength, the presentation gives it a certain advantage over the Benromach. I do like the Benromach better in the abstract, but you know, something about the presentation is bringing this bottle of Highland Park up a little bit. So 87 points out of 100. But if I'm honest, I think it's less, it might be the least Springbank-like thing here, partly because of the bourbon cask. It's doing the minerality thing. Well, hang on, let me try the Springbank again. Yeah. So the Highland Park has the minerality. It's got the rocks. It's got the sort of tea baggy notes. But it's lacking those heavy fusel notes, the rubber, the tar, the struck match. And it's lacking the sherry influence, although go to a different Highland Park and that's not such a problem. So I would give this like a 7.0 on the Springbank Substitution Index. You know, we're getting there. It's definitely, you know, better than some other options, but the Mortlach and the Benromach are actually scratching that itch a little bit better for me. But not a bad malt among these. So what do we got? 89, 85, wasn't it? 87 plus, 87. And that's kind of all I got. I may continue this series at a later point if people have suggestions below. No, I already talked about Kilkerran and Glen Scotia. Thank you. I will talk about those at some other point, just not in this series. So if you got any ideas, I was thinking maybe Amroot Fusion at some point would be a good try, but I don't know. We'll see where this goes and how people react. Thanks for watching, and cheers.